Alex Morrison straightened his tie for the third time, his reflection staring back from the department store's mirror with barely concealed frustration. The navy blue silk felt foreign against his neck. He'd always preferred simpler, more casual styles. "That color makes you look washed out," Miranda's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood behind him, arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer purse. "I told you, charcoal gray or black, nothing else. It's just a tie, Miranda, for a casual dinner with nothing about tonight is casual, Alex." Her green eyes flashed with that familiar edge he'd learned to recognize over the past 8 months. "Your colleagues will be there. My parents will be there. We need to make the right impression." Alex suppressed a sigh. When had we become code for, "You must do exactly what I say"? He changed into the charcoal gray tie she'd pre-selected, watching her nod approvingly in the mirror. "Better. Now, about tonight. You won't mention that ridiculous hiking trip. With Jake, will you? My father thinks outdoor hobbies are juvenile." "Jake's been my best friend since college, Miranda. The hiking trip was a waste of time that could have been spent networking." She stepped closer, her hand sliding up his chest in what might have looked affectionate to observers. But Alex felt the subtle pressure of her grip on his jacket. "You're going to be successful, darling, but success requires sacrifices." The word darling used to make his heart race. Now it sounded like a leash being snapped into place. They drove to the restaurant in her BMW. She'd convinced him to sell his motorcycle months ago, claiming it was too dangerous for a soon-to-be married man. The leather seats that once seemed luxurious now felt suffocating. "Remember," she said as they pulled into the valet lane, "you're considering the promotion to the Seattle branch. Even if you're not." "Miranda, I've told you, I don't want to move to Seattle. My life is here, my friends. Your life is with me." Her voice dropped to that dangerously quiet tone he'd learned to fear. "And I've already started looking at apartments there. The wedding is in 4 months, Alex. It's time you started prioritizing our future over your attachments." The dinner passed in a blur of forced smiles and carefully rehearsed conversations. Alex watched Miranda charm his colleagues while subtly steering every topic away from anything she deemed inappropriate. His love of jazz music, his volunteer, work at the animal shelter, even his passion for sustainable architecture. Later, in the privacy of her apartment, the mask finally slipped completely. "I saw you talking to that woman from HR, Miranda said, her voice ice-cold as she removed her earrings. "The redhead. Stephanie? She was asking about the Henderson project. She was flirting, and you were encouraging it." Alex felt something snap inside him. Not break, but straighten, like a spine remembering how to stand upright. "Miranda, she's married. She was being professional. Don't tell me what I saw." She turned to face him, and for a moment, Alex saw something he'd been trying to ignore for months, the cold calculation behind her beautiful features. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop being naive about other women's intentions. You're going to take the Seattle promotion, and you're going to stop seeing Jake." "What?" "You heard me. Jake fills your head with ridiculous ideas about freedom and following your dreams. He's holding you back from becoming the man I need you to be." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Alex's heartbeat in his ears. "And if I refuse?" Miranda smiled. The same smile she'd given him the night they met, only now he recognized it for what it truly was. "Then there won't be a wedding." The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had finally consumed everything worth saving. Alex stared at Miranda, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the beautiful, ambitious woman he'd fallen for, but the architect of a cage she'd been building around him one golden bar at a time. "There won't be a wedding," he repeated quietly, tasting the words. Miranda's smile faltered slightly. She'd expected pleading, negotiation, the familiar dance of his resistance followed by eventual surrender. Alex, don't be dramatic. I'm trying to help you become someone I'm not. He sat down heavily on her pristine white couch, his mind surprisingly clear. Miranda, when did you stop loving who I actually am? What are you talking about? Of course I love you, but her voice carried that patronizing tone she used when explaining why his opinions were wrong. I love your potential. I love what we could build together. But not me. Not the guy who rides motorcycles and goes hiking with his best friend and designs community centers instead of shopping malls. Alex looked around her apartment. Everything white and gold and perfect, nothing out of place. Nothing of him anywhere. When was the last time you asked what I wanted? Really asked and listened to the answer? Miranda's composure cracked slightly. I don't understand why you're being so difficult. Every suggestion I've made has been for your own good. The clothes, the car, the job opportunity, the friends I'm allowed to keep, the music I'm allowed to like, the conversations I'm allowed to have. Alex stood up, and for the first time in months he felt like he was breathing properly. That's not love, Miranda. That's ownership. Don't be ridiculous. But her voice had risen, and she was pacing now, a predator realizing her prey might actually escape. You're just scared of commitment, of growing up. No, Alex said, and the word came out with surprising strength. I'm scared of disappearing, of becoming so small and quiet and convenient that I forget I ever existed at all. Miranda stopped pacing. In the lamplight, her face looked sharp, almost feral. So what are you saying? I'm saying you're right. There won't be a wedding. The silence that followed was different from before, not heavy with threat, but somehow clean. Alex felt like he'd been holding his breath underwater and finally broken the surface. You can't be serious. Miranda's voice was small now, uncertain. Alex, we've planned everything. The venue, the flowers, the guest list you edited to remove anyone you didn't approve of. The honeymoon destination you chose without asking me. The apartment you picked out in Seattle. Alex moved toward the door, each step feeling lighter. You planned everything, Miranda. You just forgot to include me in any of it. Alex, wait. She followed him, her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood. We can work this out. We can compromise like we compromised on my motorcycle, my job, my friends. He paused at the door, hand on the handle. A real compromise requires two people, Miranda, not one person deciding what's best for both. You'll regret this. The threat was automatic, desperate. You'll never find anyone who pushes you to be better, who has vision for your future. Alex turned back one last time, looking at this woman who'd once made his heart race. Maybe not. But I'd rather be alone and myself than together and invisible. He walked out into the cool night air, leaving behind the ring, the plans, and the suffocating weight of someone else's dreams for his life. His phone buzzed almost immediately, Miranda's name flashing on the screen, then again, and again. He turned it off and started walking, with no destination in mind except away. For the first time in months, the silence felt like freedom instead of punishment. 3 blocks later, he called Jake. Alex? It's almost midnight, man. Everything okay? It is now, Alex said, and meant it. Hey, is that offer to crash on your couch still open? Always. What happened? Alex looked back in the direction of Miranda's apartment, its lights still blazing in the distance like a warning beacon. I remembered who I used to be. 2 years later, Alex stepped back from his drafting table, stretching muscles that had grown accustomed to long hours of creative flow. The Community Arts Center design spread before him was everything he'd dreamed of creating: sustainable materials, natural light flooding through innovative window placement, spaces that invited collaboration rather than demanded conformity. Working late again, Morrison? He turned to find David Chen, his business partner, holding 2 cups of coffee. The small architectural firm they'd founded 18 months ago had grown from a shared passion for environmental design into something neither had dared hope for: success built on their own terms. Just finishing the final touches on the riverside. Proposal. Alex accepted the coffee gratefully. I think we might actually have a shot at this one. With your vision and my business sense, they'd be crazy not to choose us. David grinned, settling into the chair across from Alex's desk. Speaking of which, Elena called. She said to remind you about the gallery opening tonight. Alex glanced at his watch and cursed softly. 7 o'clock, right? 7 sharp, and she specifically said not to show up in work clothes. David's expression grew knowing. She's good for you, man. I haven't seen you this solid, well, ever. Elena Rodriguez had entered Alex's life like sunlight through clouds, gradually, then all at once. He'd met her at a coffee shop near his new apartment, where she'd been editing photos on her laptop, her dark hair falling in waves around her face as she frowned at the screen. Excuse me, he'd said, drawn by something in her expression. Is that the Morrison building? She'd looked up with warm brown eyes that held none of the calculation he'd learned to fear. You know it? I'm working on a series about architectural details that tell stories. They'd talked for 3 hours that first day, about buildings and light, about dreams deferred and dreams rediscovered. She'd listened when he spoke, really listened, and shared her own stories of struggling to make art in a world that often valued commerce over creativity. Now, 6 months later, Alex found himself rushing home to shower and change, his heart rate picking up at the thought of seeing her. Not from anxiety, but from genuine excitement, a feeling he'd almost forgotten existed. The gallery buzzed with conversation and the soft clink of wine glasses. Alex found Elena standing before a series of photographs that took his breath away. His own designs, captured through her lens in ways that revealed poetry he hadn't known he'd written. You came, she said, turning with a smile that made his chest tight with something that might have been love. Wouldn't miss it. Elena, these are... He gestured at the photographs, words failing him. I see things in your work that you don't. See yourself, she said simply. Hope, maybe. Spaces where people can be authentically themselves. They moved through the gallery together, Elena's hand finding his naturally. She introduced him to other artists, to potential clients, to friends, who welcomed him without reservation. No one questioned his choices or suggested improvements to his personality. Later, on the roof deck of her apartment building, they sat sharing a bottle of wine and looking out over the city lights. Tell me about before, Elena said quietly. She'd asked before and he'd deflected. But something about the night, about her presence, made honesty feel safe. I was engaged to someone who wanted to rebuild me from scratch, Alex said finally. She had this vision of who I should become. And I almost let her succeed. Elena was quiet for a long moment. What stopped you? I realized I was disappearing, that I'd started asking her permission to have opinions. He turned to face her, struck again by how she listened without judgment. When I left, I swore I'd never make myself that small again. And now? Alex considered the question seriously. Now I feel like I'm finally the right size, like my skin fits. Elena smiled, leaning against his shoulder. I like your size just fine. Elena? Alex's voice was softer now, vulnerable in a way he'd forgotten how to be. Thank you for seeing me instead of trying to change me. She lifted her head to look at him, her eyes serious. Alex, anyone who tried to change you would be missing the point entirely. When she kissed him, it tasted like possibility, like a future built on foundation of mutual respect instead of shifting sand, like coming home to himself. Miranda Torres, She'd taken back her maiden name after the third failed relationship. Stared at her laptop screen, her manicured fingers frozen over the keyboard. The architectural firm's website glowed back at her. Morrison and Chen, sustainable design for modern living. There he was, smiling in the company photo with an ease she'd never seen when they were together. The Alex she remembered had been tense, constantly looking to her for approval. This version looked content, successful, free. Her wine glass left a ring on the coffee table, something she never would have allowed when everything in her life was perfectly controlled. But control, she'd learned, was harder to maintain than she'd thought. The Seattle job had fallen through after 6 months. The man she'd dated afterward had called her exhausting before disappearing one Tuesday morning. The one after that had lasted 3 weeks before telling her she sucked the joy out of everything. Now she lived in a studio apartment that cost twice what Alex's old place had, working as a marketing coordinator for a company that didn't appreciate her vision or her strategic insights. She clicked through the photos on the firm's Instagram account. Alex at construction sites, Alex receiving an award for sustainable design, Alex with his business partner at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and there, in recent posts, Alex with a woman. Miranda's breath caught. The woman was beautiful in an effortless way that made Miranda suddenly conscious of her own carefully applied makeup and strategically chosen outfit. In the photos, Alex's arm was around her waist, his expression soft and unguarded. Happy. The caption read, "Celebrating Elena's gallery opening. So proud of this amazing artist who sees beauty in everything." Miranda's chest tightened with something she refused to name as jealousy. She'd always been the one with vision, with plans, with the ability to see potential. How dare this random woman, this Elena, receive the kind of devotion Miranda had tried so hard to cultivate? Her finger hovered over Alex's phone number. She'd deleted and re-added it dozens of times over the past 2 years, but had never quite worked up the courage to call. What would she say? That she'd been wrong? That she missed him? No, that wasn't true. And Miranda had never been one for lies that didn't serve her purpose. She missed the version of Alex she'd been creating, the polished, successful, controllable version. This new Alex, this confident man with his own business and his obvious happiness, was foreign to her. But he was also exactly what she'd said she wanted, wasn't he? Successful, established, no longer wasting time with frivolous friends or hobbies. The irony was bitter on her tongue. Before she could lose her nerve, she dialed his number. "Hello?" His voice was the same, but warmer somehow. In the background, she could hear music. Jazz. The kind she'd always told him was pretentious. "Alex, it's Miranda." The pause stretched long enough that she wondered if he'd hung up. "Miranda, this is unexpected. I saw the article about your firm in the business journal. Congratulations." The lie came easily. She'd found him through social media stalking, not professional publications. "Thank you." His tone was polite but distant. The voice he'd use with a client he didn't particularly like. "How are you?" "I'm well. Listen, I was thinking, maybe we could get coffee sometime. Catch up?" Another pause. "I don't think that's a good idea, Miranda." "Alex, we were engaged. Surely we can be civil." "We can be civil. We're being civil right now." His voice was patient but firm. "But I'm not interested in rekindling anything, if that's what you're asking." Miranda felt her carefully constructed composure begin to crack. "I'm not asking for anything except a conversation between two adults who once cared about each other." Did we care about each other? The question was quiet, but it hit like a physical blow. "Because I remember you caring a great deal about who you wanted me to become. I'm not sure you ever cared much about who I actually was." "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Now there was something harder in his voice, though still not cruel. "Miranda, I hope you're happy. I really do. But I've built a good life. And I'm not interested in revisiting a time when I was slowly forgetting how to be myself." "She's not right for you," Miranda said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "This Elena, she's holding you back from your real potential." The silence that followed was so complete, she wondered if the call had dropped. "Miranda," Alex said finally, and his voice was infinitely sad. "Do you hear yourself right now? You don't know Elena. You don't know me anymore, but you're still so certain you know what's best for everyone else. I just think I have to go. Take care of yourself, Miranda. I mean that." The line went dead, leaving Miranda staring at her phone in the growing darkness of her apartment. Outside, the city hummed with life she wasn't part of, with joy she couldn't access, with the sound of people who'd learned to love without needing to control. For the first time in her adult life, Miranda Torres had no plan, no vision, no clear path forward. She had only the growing realization that in trying to rebuild everyone around her, she'd forgotten to build anything real for herself. 6 months later, the morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Morrison & Chen's new office space, illuminating the architectural models and sustainable material samples that filled the bright, open workspace. Alex stood at the window with his coffee, watching the city wake up below, feeling that familiar sense of gratitude for the life he'd built from scratch. "You're here early." Elena's voice came from behind him, warm with affection and sleep. He turned to find her in the doorway, her dark hair tousled, wearing one of his old college t-shirts that somehow looked better on her than it ever had on him. She'd started keeping clothes at the office after too many late nights working on collaborative projects, her photography documenting his architectural vision, his designs inspired by her artist's eye for beauty in unexpected places. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted, pulling her into his arms. "Good nervous." "The Henderson presentation?" "Among other things." Alex kissed the top of her head, breathing, in the scent of her shampoo mixed with the faint smell of dark-room chemicals that always clung to her fingers. "Elena, I need to tell you something." She pulled back to look at him, those warm brown eyes alert with concern. "What is it?" "Miranda called again last night." Elena's expression didn't change, but Alex felt her shoulders tense slightly. Over the past 6 months, his ex-fiancée had reached out with increasing frequency, always with some excuse, some professional reason for contact that barely masked her growing desperation to reconnect. What did she want this time? "To inform me that she's engaged." Alex ran his fingers through Elena's hair, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. "To someone named Robert who works in finance and has real ambition." "And how do you feel about that?" It was such an Elena question. Direct, caring, focused on his emotional well-being rather than her own insecurity. Miranda would have made the conversation about herself, about what Miranda's engagement meant for their potential future. Elena simply wanted to know if he was okay. Happy for her, I think, and relieved. Alex considered his words carefully. She sounded different. Lighter, maybe, like she'd finally found someone who wanted to be the person she needed them to become. Elena smiled, and Alex felt his chest expand with something that had taken him months to recognize as uncomplicated love. "There's something else," he continued. "She thanked me." "Thanked you?" "For walking away. She said it forced her to figure out what she actually wanted instead of just trying to change what was in front of her." Alex shook his head, still amazed. "She said she finally understood the difference between loving someone and loving the idea of someone." Elena was quiet for a moment, processing. That's actually quite mature of her. It was, and it made me realize something. Alex stepped back, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since their first date. Elena, I've been thinking about what I want. Not what someone else thinks I should want. Not what would look good on paper, but what would actually make me happy. Alex, let me finish. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a simple silver ring set with a stone that caught the morning light. This isn't a diamond. It's a piece of sea glass I found on that beach in Mendocino where you shot the sunset. Series. I had it set by a jeweler who makes pieces from recycled materials. Elena's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. I'm not asking you to change anything about yourself, Alex continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I'm not asking you to move to a different city or give up your friends or start dressing differently. I'm asking if you want to build something together. A partnership where we both get to stay exactly who we are, just together. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Alex Morrison, are you proposing to me in your office at 7 in the morning, while I'm wearing your old t-shirt and haven't brushed my teeth? Yes, he said simply. Because this is real life, not a performance. And real life with you is better than any fantasy I could construct. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Not because he'd guessed her size, but because he'd paid attention to the jewelry she actually wore, the simple pieces that reflected her authentic style rather than someone else's vision of who she should be. They held each other as the sun climbed higher, warming the office space that had become a symbol of everything Alex had built after choosing himself over someone else's expectations. Elena, he said after a while. Thank you for loving me as is. She pulled back to look at him, her engagement ring catching the light. Alex, as is the only way worth loving anyone. The rest is just playing dress-up. Later, as they worked side by side, Alex on his architectural plans, Elena editing photos from their latest collaborative project, he felt the deep contentment of a life lived authentically. No performance, no carefully managed image, no exhausting effort to be someone else's version of perfect. Just the quiet satisfaction of being himself, with someone who saw that self as more than enough. Outside the windows, the city hummed with possibility, and Alex Morrison was finally free to embrace all of it.